The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Suckling on the teat of tech.
With Paul Brislen.
Yeah, why not? Let's talk high-tech, the week in technology with Paul Brislen. Good morning to you, Paul.
Good morning, how are you?
Very, very well, very well. A few great subjects for us today. First of all, miniature medical machines.
I know, I love miniaturization. We're not talking submarines, though, just yet, that you can then miniaturize and swim into the brain of a mad scientist to like the 50s movies would have you believe, but these aren't too far off the mark. This is a little suite of cheap and very efficient biomedical sensors that do basic analysis work, but very, very cheaply. So we're talking about things like a tiny little sensor that measures, for example, glucose levels in your blood. So if you're diabetic, you've got one of these things you stick on, and it lets you know how you're doing, whether or not you need insulin, whether or not you've got too much, all that kind of thing. That's but this is made out of paper. This is a tiny, tiny little piece of paper-based material. It's just sort of compressed cardboard, basically, and it does all the job quite cheaply and efficiently.
Wow.
And quickly as well, and that's really the key. There's a couple of others as well. One looks at HIV, and in countries in Africa where HIV is rampant, it's very difficult to get proper diagnoses and get them in a timely fashion. And the medical treatments for HIV these days work quite effectively, but only if you take the right dosage at exactly the right time in your incubation period. So to be able to develop a tiny little sensor that is cheap and quick at turning around a response means that medics in Africa are able to give you a better diagnosis and treat you more efficiently, saving millions of dollars and potentially saving a lot of lives as well.
And I suppose, this is a potential something that if you were a sickly sort of person, you might wear that all the time, and potentially it could, via RFID or something like that, communicate back to your GP. Well,
that's exactly right. I mean, that's where medical sensors are going. We talked about medical underpants the other day, and this is kind of the other extreme, if you like. These are, rather than being high tech, these are incredibly low tech and very, very specific. So for these kinds of things, you're dead right. That's the next step, of course, is to have sensors that report back. I have heard about pacemakers that can be fitted for heart arrhythmias and things of this sort that basically use the cell phone network, GPRS, to report back to a place in Germany, which then tells your doctor. And that seems to me to be a little bit long-winded and convoluted.
Yeah.
Why isn't your pacemaker just talking directly to the doctor anyway?
Yeah.
Giving them an update on how you're doing in real time. That seems to me to be the next logical step.
Yeah, something that can provide most of the data the doctor needs. Perhaps you won't even need to come in for that regular sort of checkup.
Exactly. And that's the key to a lot of these things. Making you as comfortable as possible. Stay at home. You're not feeling too well. I can see that from the sensor. Unless there's something that I can't diagnose from this thing, you just stay there and rest. We will contact the pharmacy. They will ship the drugs straight to you, and you don't have to drive and sit in a waiting room with a whole bunch of sick people and then come back out again.
Indeed.
So, great opportunities there, great possibilities.
News this week that Google, there's a rumour going around that it's apparently all but confirmed, but there are inside people apparently on this project that have leaked the information from Google that they will be at some stage soon releasing something called Google Me.
Google Me, yes, we will be assimilated.
Yeah.
we will all become part of the Borg. It's just like My Computer from Windows, only this is Google Me. This is, of course, social media. And never mind your Facebook and your Twitter and your YouTube and, everything else that's going on. Google, of course, has massive amounts of capability in this area and has spent some time buying companies over the last few years and is rumoured to be, launching its own social media platform.
Well,
but I have my doubts.
You got to wonder, because it has to be more successful than that thing called Wave.
Yep.
And that other thing called Buzz.
Called the Buzz, both of which you could wave goodbye to, and the Buzz was more of a tickle, really, wasn't it? It didn't really actually happen. Probably, I think, because they were too much of a radical leap. The Wave, I still to this day don't actually know what you're supposed to do with it. Whatever it was doing, it did it beautifully.
Oh, it
but
did,
I'm not
yeah.
really sure quite what I was supposed to do with it.
Yeah.
So, depending on... That's always the problem with incredibly smart people on a blank piece of paper and a huge research budget. You can build anything, and some of them actually do. They can build anything you like, and some things you've never thought of. So it'll be interesting to see. It's also very difficult, I think, to come into a market like social media, where people already have their networks set up and they're very, very embedded. To come in with a brand new proposition and then somehow try to grow in the market. I wonder how easy that is.
I mean, how do you attract people away from Facebook? I mean, Facebook is just such a runaway success. Everyone is there.
Yep. Even me, to my horror. But and I still struggle with Facebook because I'm not that interested in what I do, let alone other people being that interested in what I do. So I'm a bit of a failure at it. But as you say, there are billions of people on the planet using Facebook these days, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how Google can go into that market this late on and say, "Hey, we've got one too. Let's all swap over." Perhaps that's not what they're going to do. Perhaps they're going to be very cunning and try and, use their existing Gmail base, perhaps, or tie it all in with YouTube. They did buy a small company that does something very similar to Twitter, so perhaps they're going to try and combine all three and come up with something else entirely. If anybody can do it, it's probably Google. Yeah. So,
I want them to win at this. I do want to win them to win at this because even with this latest controversy with the Wi-Fi Street View where they were going around mining data, it doesn't disturb me as much as Facebook does with a lot of its practices.
That's right, and I do think that Facebook's really struggling with the whole privacy issue in particular. It doesn't seem to take it quite as seriously as I would like. And Google's had its own brushes with that, but I get the feeling they've learned from some of these mistakes and that they could actually, potentially make a change and become quite the champions for privacy. And that, to me, that bodes quite well, I think.
And finally, Paul, an interesting story coming out of Kenya where they're getting everyone to register mobile phones.
Yes, it sounds quite draconian, but it's quite interesting. They are registering all mobile phone numbers and tying them to individuals. And if your phone number's not registered, it will be disconnected, which sounds to me to be really quite, we're used to being able to just go into a dairy and pick up a SIM card, chuck it in a phone, and away you go. But in Kenya, the reason they're doing this is because that the Kenyan banking industry basically stops at the end of the street. And if you're doing business in Kenya, you end up doing it all in cash. And that leads to a lot of robberies and a lot of assaults and murders because everybody carries around large amounts of cash just to do everyday basic things. Well, a few years ago, that's all started to change with the introduction of a thing called M-Pesa, which uses your mobile phone as your banking instrument, a bit like your EFTPOS card. So you walk into a shop, you say, "I would like to buy all of this stuff, thanks. Here's my cell phone." And you text the shop owner a number, and the shop owner texts back, and the system authorizes the transfer of payments, and the money goes straight from your bank account into the shop owner's bank account. Now, this has, it sounds quite basic, is what you do with an EFTPOS card here, but in a country with no massive amounts of infrastructure, no ability to do that, it has completely changed the way Kenyan society works, because suddenly, instead of the husbands going into the city to work and only getting paid once a month, so the money arrives at the start of the month, and the family back home has to try and eke it out for a full month. They actually just get paid weekly, like normal people.
Great.
And it means that they're a lot safer moving around the place. So this isn't quite the draconian measure it seems. It's in fact a sort of a maturing of the banking system and using your cell phone as a bank. I'd love to do that here. I don't need to carry a wallet around, just my cell phone.
Yeah, well, they're doing it in Japan. Aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at your SIM card, it's exactly the same as the chips that are going on the credit card. So, there you are. It's one less thing to carry around.
Excellent, Paul. Thanks so much for telling us about it and letting us in on your Technology Week.
Anytime.
Paul Brislen there, and you can also see him on Twitter as well, twitter.com